Our next session, your marketing budget is funding the climate crisis. Here's how to stop it. Please welcome to the stage, Head of Advocacy and Movement Building, 7th Generation, Kate Ogden, Executive Director, Clean Creatives, Duncan Meisel, and Executive Vice President, Purpose, Allison PR, Whitney Dailey.
Excellent. So I'm going to get right into it. My name is Duncan Meisel. I'm the Executive Director of Clean Creatives. We're a movement of people in the advertising and PR industry cutting ties with fossil fuel polluters. So Clean Creatives, that's us. That's the first slide. So we're here today for one very simple reason, which is that fossil fuel companies are lying about everything. Every misleading thing that anyone believes about climate change has its origins in a relationship between a fossil fuel company and an advertising or PR agency. So the reason that they have to lie about everything is because they are deeply committed to fighting the climate transition. So I'm sure all of you have seen an ad from a fossil fuel company before, probably a lot of them at this point. And you probably have a picture in your mind of what those look like. There's like solar panels in it, there's like a wind turbine, there's a cute kid, maybe some people in hard hats. Based on those ads, I want you to take a moment to reflect and think about what percentage of those companies' cash spending do you think goes to clean energy or carbon capture? Just think of a number in your mind. Try to imagine what it might be based on what you've seen. The real answer is that they spend about 1% of their cash expenditures on average on anything related to renewables, sustainability, carbon capture, 1%. And I guarantee it makes up way more than 1% of their advertising. So I'm going to go through some fossil fuel ads real quick. This is a pretty typical example. We have our cool solar panels, we have some trees, we have a young child, multiracial child, they love it. We have a promise to invest in tomorrow's solutions. These all happen to be from Shell, but they are pretty representative, I think, of an average sample of fossil fuel ads. Here's the thing. Every single one of the ads you've just seen have been banned by some regulator around the world for being false or misleading, and they were taken down. So every misleading story about climate change begins with an agency working for the fossil fuel industry, whether it's climate denial, whether it's endorsing false solutions like magically producing oil from algae, which Exxon promised to do and then never sold a single drop of, whether it's purpose or whatever this washing is. I don't know what a pregnant lesbian couple has to do with Chevron, but they put it in their ad. Whether it's delay, sort of making the scientific quote-unquote case that we don't need to transition away from fossil fuels. All of these begin with the advertising and PR industry. And they're almost all false. Last summer, Shell promised to increase their fossil fuel production and roll back their commitments to renewable. That happened on June 14th. 2 days later, Shell launched these ads on Facebook, saying that they had a 100% renewable electricity plan. Shell is misleading the public every single day with their advertising and PR, and it's done with the help of the advertising industry. Chevron, 80% of their ads over the course of a year in 2020 and 2021 mentioned something about sustainability, renewable energy, the environment, clean. During that same period of time, 1.8% of their capital expenditures went to any of the programs that they were advertising. So advertising and PR agencies are the people behind this. And at Clean Creatives, every year we put out a report that we call the F-List. And the F-List is a documentation of every single agency that we can find that has some contract with a fossil fuel company. And those contracts are concentrated in the hands of holding companies. And holding companies are the advertising agencies that are sort of conglomerates of all sorts of different media buying, branding, creative, PR. They're all held together in these big holding companies. And those holding companies are deeply invested in their fossil fuel clients. So WPP is the world's largest ad agency. They have 79 global contracts with fossil fuel polluters. We discovered one that they have with Total Energies helping promote the East Africa crude oil pipeline. Their agency put out a video admitting to creating a fake front group and helping support the repression of activists in Uganda to build the pipeline. That's the kind of work that these companies do. Omnicom Group, another one of the biggest, they have 74 global contracts. IPG has at least 50 connections to fossil fuel companies. The Publicis Group has 40. Next slide, let's do it. We are frozen. There we go. Havas is another French advertising conglomerate. They have at least 19 global contracts with fossil fuel polluters. And I want to make an analogy to the work about the work we're trying to do at Clean Creatives and compare it to a past piece of work on public health. So CO2 emissions up until 2021, this is a graph. Not a great graph. You see the line going up. There's a few dips here and there, but it's pretty much a straight line up to the top. And that looks a lot like another graph of cigarettes sales in the US up until about 1970. And in 1970, the US banned cigarette ads on radio and television. And guess what happens after that? The line goes straight down almost immediately. And there's a bunch of other public health initiatives happening at the same time that help influence this trend. But the fact that there's no advertising in PR or advertising on television all the time promoting tobacco means that it's easier to do things like promote smoking bans in public, to limit smoking on flights and airplanes, to increase taxes on cigarettes. The communications infrastructure that is behind the tobacco industry makes it easier for them to fight regulation. And when they have less firepower, they can't fight the regulation as effectively, and we're able to tackle a public health crisis. That's what we need to do for fossil fuels. We are at the top of that chart right now. We need to get that line to go down, and we think limiting fossil fuel advertising in PR is a vital part of solving that problem. And there's a vital role that companies that hire advertising agencies can play in particular. If you are a company, a brand, and you've ever hired an advertising and PR agency, you can actually influence how this industry functions when it comes to fossil fuels. And we know that because it's happened before. So in 2014, there was a big campaign to stop the Keystone XL tar sands pipeline. And there was a bunch of news about what was happening, and documents were leaked that showed that Edelman, which is one of the world's largest PR companies, was working with the American Petroleum Institute on promoting this very dirty pipeline. And Edelman has worked with the American Petroleum Institute at this point for decades, and it's roughly a $30 million a year contract. At the same time, Edelman had a contract with Unilever, which had been trying to adopt lots of initiatives around their sustainability policies. And the CEO of Unilever called up the CEO of Edelman and said, I feel like when I work with you, I am subsidizing the tar sands. And after that one phone call, Edelman dropped their relationship with the American Petroleum Institute, which is one of their largest standing and most lucrative contracts that they'd had for decades. So when brands have these contracts or have contracts with agencies that are promoting fossil fuels, you're lending legitimacy, resources, insights, and collaboration to the industry that is destroying the planet. And we're here to give you a framework for how you can confront that. So I'm going to pass the mic now to Kate Ogden from 7th Generation.
Great job. Hi, everyone. My name's Kate Ogden. I'm the head of advocacy at 7th Generation. We are a sustainable home care company headquartered in Burlington, Vermont. You might know us from some of our greatest hits like laundry detergent, dish soap, other things you use to do your chores. And in my role as the head of advocacy, I have the great privilege of leading all of the advocacy and activism work that 7th Generation does around climate justice. And if I had to summarize the overall objective of our advocacy work right now, I would say that what we are striving to do is to rein in the influence of the fossil fuel industry. And the reason that is the clear focus that we have right now is that we're in a moment where we are seeing renewable energy take off and scale massively, while at the same time we also know that domestic oil and gas production are going up, exports of oil and gas are going up and are going to continue to go up through the end of this decade and beyond. And so at 7th Generation, we were pioneers of CSR impact reporting. We were one of the earliest adopters of putting out an impact report. And when we started doing that, one of the values that we held ourselves to was radical transparency. But in 2022, when we took a step back and asked ourselves whether the traditional approach we had taken to our impact reporting was truly meeting the moment and what was being called for, we decided we truly weren't. And because in that moment, we also understood, because of great reporting from organizations like Topo Finance, putting out things like the Carbon Bankroll Report, that corporate cash was in itself a supply chain that we didn't truly understand the impact that it was having on the climate. We knew, because of such great reporting, that when we put our cash in some of the biggest banks in the world, those banks were lending that money out to build new fossil fuel infrastructure. And so we knew that if that impact was existing there in our banking, then every single dollar that we spend and invest across the entire business likely also carried a climate impact that we weren't aware of, that we weren't measuring, and that we weren't setting a strategy against. And so we went looking into our banking, we went looking into our insurance, our employee investments, our foundation, our tax dollars, our corporate governance, our advocacy program, and into our marketing. We had the great benefit of being familiar with Duncan's work and with the work that Clean Creatives had been leading on. And so where we started with this work was to take the Clean Creatives Pledge, which is there for agencies to pledge not to work with the fossil fuel industry. And we turned that into a series of survey questions. And we sent that to all of our marketing service providers, which was about 40 different agencies. It included our PR agency, our creative, our media buying agency, all the way through to consumer insights, and even our couponing agency. And we wanted to know, are you currently working with fossil fuel industry clients? If not, do you have a policy in place that precludes you from working with the fossil fuel industry? And do you have climate targets? Are you working to reduce your greenhouse gas emissions? What we learned from that, first of all, was that some of our agency partners didn't want to answer our survey. For the folks who did, we learned that this was a place that there was a lot of room for improvement. And so we knew that we had to partner very closely with our marketing function. This couldn't be an effort that was led exclusively by the sustainability department, but one that we were going to have to build really strong relationships and stakeholder buy-in across the entire business. So we set out to work with our marketing partners to create some new tools and frameworks for thinking about how we were going to do this work together. And one of the first places that we had to start is we knew it was never our goal to say we are going to fire all 40 of our agencies and go find agencies that aren't currently working with the fossil fuel industry. When we knew we could stand to have the greatest impact was actually to leverage the influence that we had as a client to work with our agencies on changing their policies. So we connected with our partners on the marketing team, and we wanted to understand, where is the greatest impact? Where are we spending the most? And where do we have the strongest relationships and the best chance at actually working to leverage the influence that we have? We also knew, for example, that our agency universe was going to constantly change and evolve. And so we wanted to make sure that we were aligned on, from this point forward, let's really understand what we're looking for in an agency, and if at all possible, avoid entering into a new relationship with an agency that's supporting the fossil fuel industry. The next step there was to engage our current agency partners. I'm really excited to be sharing the stage with Whitney Dailey. You'll hear from her in a moment. But 7th Generation's PR agency of record is Allison Worldwide. And after supporting us on much of the work that we did to create our impact report, where we looked at all of this, we had the opportunity to ask them to sign the Clean Creatives Pledge, and they did, and they became the largest agency yet to have signed that pledge. Not long after that, we went through a process to find a new creative agency, and upon winning 7th Generation's business, Mother New York also signed the Clean Creatives Pledge. But we're not done yet, because we are a fully owned subsidiary of Unilever, and one of the most important lessons that we learned through this process is that when we set out to RFP a new creative agency, we found that out of the many agencies that were in the Unilever marketing procurement network, only 6 of them were not currently on the F list. And so our ability to RFP an agency was, within that universe, was pretty constrained. And so we know that because we own our marketing relationships at the company level, it was a great place for us to start. We've done a lot of work to make sure that our vendor network is aligned with our values and with our climate strategy, and we have a new horizon in front of us to really understand how we can be partnering and building that stakeholder relationship with our parent company to continue to shift and make sure that as we go into the future, as our agency relationships evolve, we're always working with agencies who are aligned and are supporting and not undermining 7th generation's climate strategy. The last thing that I'll say before I hand it over to Whitney is that this work to decarbonize 100% of your business, to look at your corporate cash as a supply chain, is incredibly challenging. There aren't a lot of roadmaps or a lot of clear paths forward, but it is only when more companies get involved in this work, when more agencies are hearing from their clients that this is something that you care about, that you want their work to support your climate strategies and not work against it, that the needle is really going to move on this. So this is not only an opportunity for us to share this work with all of you, but really wanting to enlist you all, and I hope that you hear this as a call to action. But one of the most important things that you can do when you leave this room is ask your agencies whether or not they work with the fossil fuel industry and if they would be interested in signing the Clean Creatives Pledge. Thank you.
So you heard from Kate on a little bit about the process. I'll share what it's been like on the agency side. Hi everyone, my name is Whitney Dailey. I'm an Executive Vice President at Allison. We are a global integrated marketing firm. This all starts with a question, which really came from our clients, including Kate. And the question was, what if? What if a global PR agency could choose a different course? One in which we were signaling to the industry that we would no longer work with oil, coal, or gas, and that that was not only possible, but a route to continued success. Which prompted a second question for us, which is, what is the role of communications agencies today? And this was the answer that we found when we explored that question. We, as communications agencies, shape cultural conversations. We connect hearts and minds. We make people believe in things. And if we're good at our jobs, we're also changing behaviors. That is the role of a communications agency in society, but how we use those powers, those tools, is still up to each of us as an agency. And certainly, as Duncan shared, many agencies have chosen to use those powers and those tools to perpetuate myths and deceptions that keep fossil fuels in our homes, our cars, and in our air. These are just some of the headlines that unpack that as we see a change in the conversation and a move beyond fossil fuels. Why? Because the reality and the urgency is far too hard to ignore today. This is a photo just blocks from where we are today, obviously taking place last summer during the Canadian wildfires that blew smoke into Manhattan at a scale we had never seen before. But while we continue to fight the climate crisis, budgets of major oil, coal, and gas companies, which are quite large, we're also fighting something new from a communications perspective that's important to unpack. And this is something that's been building since the 2016 presidential election, and that is the impact of mis and disinformation on important societal conversations, including the climate crisis. So I want to take a moment to unpack this even further. We're going to talk about gas price wizard, Tony Climate, and Truth Now. And we're going to look at how various platforms are fueling conversations that end up in mainstream conversations and mainstream media. To do this, we used our proprietary technology. It's called Allison Issues Monitor, which goes into the deep web, anonymous web, fringe networks, and even popular social media channels with conspiracy communities that exist on them. And we looked at how these conversations infiltrate our popular dialogue. So here's an example. This is a post from Gas Price Wizard. He's actually reposting a repost of an article that talks about EVs. It's actually an article that was in the Times, written by their industrials reporter, which essentially said, EVs today, it's not funded enough, the infrastructure is not funded, the systems are not funded, and they're too expensive. So not necessarily a message that's going to help us communicate the green transition and the clean transition, but certainly, this person's personal opinion. Where this gets challenging is when you look at the impact of these tweets in this conversation. This is a conversation that bots are running to like bees to honey. As you can see on the screen here, 62% of the reposts of this tweet were from bot-like accounts. Not only that, but Gas Price Wizard is a bot-like account in and of itself. So what does that mean? Gas Price Wizard is posting 50 messages, tweets a day on various topics. I mean, that sounds like a full-time job to me. And it is. This is not a robot. This is a human being that is being paid to spread mis and disinformation online. Now let's look at Tony Climate. Tony Climate is telling us that US burn acreage is actually down 90% from pre-industrial times. Wow, this is really good news. Forest fires, wildfires are actually decreasing, so good job. This is obviously in contrary to what we see reported in popular media, that climate change caused wildfires are increasing in scale and volume. The problem with a tweet like this is that he is actually using data about controlled burns, not necessarily analogous to climate change caused wildfires. The other issue that we see with a tweet like this is that he's citing a piece of data in a report that's 23 years old. But if you don't spend the time to unpack this, you may not know this. Again, bots love this stuff. 72% of reposts of this were from bot-like accounts. And Tony Climate himself is identified as a bot-like account. So you're starting to see a common theme here. And this is that online conversations, accounts that are bot or bot-like, are fueling misinformation, disinformation, toxic conversations about issues that we all care about that are being heard and seen by everyday individuals who believe that they are fact. So we need to look at this in detail, and if you look at this Truth Now post, this has the potential to reach about 500,000 individuals. And that is where we see the problem start to unfold, which gets me back to my original question: what is the role of communications agencies? And I can say that we are not going to issue a war on bots. Bots are going to be bots and do what bots do. However, we need to think really critically about how we use our platform as a communications agency with a global reach, and what are the types of stories that we want to be telling, what are the behaviors that we want to drive. This is a sampling of the conversations that we want to up-level and celebrate. And that is that this transition that we all speak of is not only possible, but it's exciting, that it can be healthy and just, and we can move away from fossil fuels. And these are some of the clients that are doing that. So that is why, when we started out with that question, at the end of our conversation, we decided to sign the Clean Creatives Pledge. And I'll close with one more question. As Kate mentioned, we are currently the largest agency to have signed the Clean Creatives Pledge, but we hope that we are not for long. So what if others join us? I invite you to join us as well.
So I'm just going to briefly talk more about the F-lists. Earlier this summer, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres gave a speech where he talked about the risks of fossil fuel production and then the agencies that are working with them. And he said that it's time for ad agencies and PR agencies to drop their fossil fuel clients and take on no new ones as of today. He said it's toxic to your brand and to the planet. And he had this line in there that we really liked called "The Madmen Fueling the Madness." And the reason that we decided to focus this year's F-list on that theme is not just that we thought it's a cool quote, it is, but because this kind of work with fossil fuels represents the past. In the ad industry, a lot of things have changed about office culture. There's no more 3 martini lunches, you can't smoke inside. a lot of stuff has changed about advertising, except when it comes to this issue. Too many agencies still treat climate change and fossil fuels as if it's 1970. And our list of the F list shows how many agencies are still stuck in the past. Now, it's a long list. There are 590 agencies that we found that work with fossil fuels, but that doesn't represent anywhere near the majority of the ad industry. There was a survey done by Campaign Magazine of the top 100 agencies in the UK. 75% of them said they weren't working with fossil fuels, and 15% more said that they were looking to reduce their work with fossil fuels over the coming years. So we know that this list doesn't represent the entirety of the ad industry, but it's a very important piece that we need to look at. And the top thing that we hear when we talk to people who work at agencies on the F list is that they need to hear from their clients. They need to hear from the people that hire them, that work with them on their contracts, that this is an issue for them. And when they have that feedback, that's when they can take it to their CEO, their CFO, their CMO. So I was just at an event focusing on climate change and public health with the Global Climate Health Alliance, great organization. And you can see in our little Photoshop here of Don Draper looking out at the New York City skyline. There's a photo from those wildfires we mentioned. By the way, did you know a lot of those wildfires never went out this winter? They just kept burning all through the winter in Canada, which is a very disturbing measure of where we are when it comes to the climate crisis. This is a very clear public health threat. And there are people in that room who've worked with many big agencies, and I brought this up, that if you have an agency that also has a fossil fuel client, you have a conflict of interest, because those clients on the fossil fuel side are helping promote those wildfires that are putting smoke in the air, that are putting people in hospitals. And so I just thought it would be helpful. I just pulled it up for them and I did a little search. If you can Control F for an agency name, you can see what kinds of fossil fuel clients they have. So this is an example from Edelman, which is one of the world's largest PR firms. We found 11 contracts in the past 2 years that they've had with some of the world's biggest polluters, including ADNOC, which is the Abu Dhabi National Oil Company, Chevron, ConocoPhillips. They helped promote ConocoPhillips' expansion of the Willow Project, Sabic, which is a subsidiary of Aramco, so on and so forth. So we provide the F list as a resource to agencies, to people who are being hired, but also very importantly, to brands that are engaging with agencies to give them the tools they need to understand where the conflicts of interest lie. And so this is available to you at cleancreatives.org/flist. If you just go to cleancreatives.org, it's listed right there at the top under the menu. So I wanted to provide that preview of the F list and say a little bit why we have that, because we want to offer it as a tool to everybody here in the audience to better understand the ad industry, the PR industry, and the relationships that exist within it.
I've got one more thing for you. A year ago at Climate Week, I had a chance to sit down with Clean Creatives, with Topo Finance, and with 5 companies: Seventh Generation, Ben & Jerry's, Lush, Burton Snowboards, and Patagonia. And we wanted to have a conversation. I should say, notably, we sat down in the Allison PR office, who graciously gave us space that day. And we wanted to talk about this question of how do we decarbonize corporate cash. All of these companies were working on this challenge. They were working on different parts of the business. They were having different areas of success and different challenges. And we realized we have so much to learn from each other. This work is so challenging. There's no roadmap for it because not that many people are really deep into it yet. Let's share with each other the resources we've created, the ways that we've built relationships with our corporate treasuries, with our marketing teams, with our colleagues in different parts of the business who we need to work together in order to do this. And then we said, if we benefit this much from sharing resources across this table, there's probably a lot of other folks who are working in other companies, at other brands, in other contexts, who might really benefit from seeing what we've learned, what challenges we've faced, what tools we've created for ourselves to move past those challenges. And I'll be the first person to say that I know at Seventh Generation, we have a long way to go. We're at the very beginning of this work. But when I talk to other folks at other companies, at other brands who are starting to do this, what I hear over and over again is, well, we can't talk about that because we haven't done enough yet. We haven't completely decarbonized our business yet, so who are we to talk about that? We all know that no one has figured this out yet. but it is only when we start to talk to each other about it, when we start to share what's difficult, what successes we're having, and when more people start to engage in this work and do it, that it's going to become easier and faster for everyone. So I offer this to you. Over the past year, we've worked on collecting case studies, pulling the resources and pulling the narratives of the work that has been done within the companies I mentioned, as well as a few others. We want to share that with all of you. So grab this QR code, share it with your friends, and thank you so much for joining us today.